When I was in high school, I was obsessed with the aesthetics of early to mid 1900s America. It just seemed so classy and fun and nostalgic. So, when National Novel Writing Month came around, I wrote a story set in this time period about a mafia and a circus colliding, because that seemed like the best way to take advantage of the cool factor of this time period, I guess. The summary on NaNoWriMo's website reads, as the youngest child of an 8th generation mafia family, Leto just wants some peace and quiet for once in his life, but when his wish gets granted in the form of a traveling circus and a peculiar fire-breathing boy, he begins to think twice. Getting dragged into a high-stakes relay race spanning more lives, near-death experiences, and real-death experiences than he would like to count is not his definition of peace and quiet. Soon to be a webcomic. So yes, this was supposed to be a webcomic. However, there were many things preventing this from happening. For one, the scope was way too large. When I wrote this story spanning multiple lives, I meant that there was a reincarnation element where these characters would reincarnate to like past lives, future lives, different fantasy worlds that like don't even resemble Earth. And there would be entire epic stories that happened there that also wove together across timelines, and there would be a big conspiracy about souls and reincarnation and other cool things. But the truth is, if you can't write a one-shot, there is absolutely no way you're writing an epic of any sort. So my goal with reapproaching this story as an adult is to narrow the scope and distill the coolness factor into something approachable and grounded. The problem with such a huge story scope was that I never closed any of the loops, there were no arcs or endings, which made it really hard to create characters that served the story because there was no story.
The work is mysterious and important.
Work is bullshit.
So here we are giving these characters and concepts the chance to be reborn because I genuinely think that there is so much potential to be had here. I'm going to give myself a game to play throughout the redevelopment of this project. Since my main issue was the story being very vague and unresolved, I'm going to focus on growing it from the most basic aspects outwards. So I'm going to give myself one standard comic page to tell the entire story. If I can do that, I'm allowed to move on to the next stage, which is like sketching the character lineup or something like that. After that, I get 2 pages to develop the story, and so on and so forth. So this video will be spoiling the entire story from the get-go, but honestly, it's fine. It is just an experiment, and when people are like, oh, I can't tell you this OC lore because I'm gonna make a comic, it's a spoiler. Like, when is the comic coming out? Do you have a plan to release it? Is it gonna be out in the next year? In the next 5 years? In the next 10 years? Are we gonna reach that plot point within the next 50 years, do you think? Like, let's be so for real right now. You know the answer. Here's how we're gonna fix this. I've been brainstorming this past week, like different story ideas, rereading what I've already written and like seeing what exactly is wrong with it and where the story wanted really badly to go but didn't. There's 2 main aspects to the story, right? There's the mafia and there's the circus. Why did I choose these 2 things? And what makes them interesting, right? And how can they come into conflict with each other and interact in interesting ways? What I have concluded is that both of them are about family. You know, literally mafia family. The circus is also a family of performers. The story originally had 2 main characters, right? The son of a mafia family, Leto, and a kid who was raised in the circus called Soul. By the way, I've come to realize that naming your OC Soul is like the equivalent of naming your Asian child Kevin. So these are our 2 main characters, right? And they need to represent or like embody the conflict of these 2 organizations. If Leto was raised in a mafia, he is the type of character who hates it. He hates it. So that means Soul has to love being raised as a performer by performer parents. Loves it. And why does Leto hate being born in the mafia? So these 2 organizations are gonna need their leaders, right? This branch, I forget what it's called, branch of the mafia is headed by Leto's dad. Okay, his name was Cous, named after the Greek Titan. These characters are all named after like Greek Titans, but there's like no correlation. And then the circus is headed by this woman called Annabelle. And let's just say Annabelle is Soul's mom, Kois is Leto's dad. So to these two main characters, this person, this head of the organization, represents everything that they hate about it or love about it. So this means that this dad figure is super corrupt, just like violent and awful, and like embodies everything wrong with the mafia. Oppressive, doesn't really give Leto a choice as to what he wants to do. And then that means Annabelle has a strict moral code and really taught Soul to be like a good person who like does good for other people. Kind of a hero figure, I would say she is, because he really looks up to her. So this is the setup. What is something that is the most awful thing that could happen that would throw our main character's perception of the world into total chaos? And it turns out that that thing is like, if Kois, this awful, horrible human being that Leto thinks he is, so hates being his son, turns out this guy actually has love in his heart, capable of love, which means that Annabelle is capable of evil. And our two main characters are gonna have to like find this out in possibly the worst way possible. So looking at all this, I was thinking, if I had to explain this entire story in one comic page, I think it can be told in about 3 panels. This first panel will be about Leto, kind of thinking, I hate my dad. I wish he'd just die. In the foreground, maybe like, there's like, gotta be Kois's hand somehow. He's like killing this guy here. Maybe there's like a bit of a crowd in the background so that we know it's like a spectacle. This is his brother and his sister. I don't think his sister would be there, question mark. The second panel has got to be like Soul. Just like so starry-eyed. I love my mom. I wish I could be just like her. Maybe he's also like in a crowd of people watching this performance his mom is putting on. And then the third panel, Annabelle is gonna... I'm not sure the specifics yet because we're not going into specifics, right? But the basic idea is like Annabelle will be killing Kois. So that is like the climax of the story, I guess, is that these two parental figures will subvert what their children think they are. Like, obviously, Kois can die and still be an awful person. So he needs to die in a way where it's like he was protecting Leto or something like that. So these two need to be like witnessing this scene kind of like traumatized. Obviously, there will be more details later, but like this is the basic idea. I think there should be like a little dialogue here of these two like thinking, like, hold up. Not like this. Sort of that kind of energy. And like, you may be concerned, like, if Annabelle is a good person and she kills the bad person, then she is still the good person, right? Well, that is for the rest of the story to develop, right? Perhaps she has always taught Soul that like, no matter how bad someone is, like, they still deserve mercy. Or maybe she colluded with someone else in order to take this man down and she has ulterior motives for doing that. And maybe Kois actually set this whole mafia thing up to protect Leto or whatever. Like, there's other details that haven't been established yet. But it's basically just about like two family dynamics, how our main character is influenced by them, and then how it gets like subverted in the end. So before I start anything super specific about any singular character, I wanted to sketch out a lineup of the overall cast, starting with our two main characters and expanding on their respective families. I think when you're designing an entire story, especially one where like the family and the cast aspect is really important, we cannot get lost in the weeds. Like, this character is kind of defined by the people they're surrounded with and the environment that they find themselves in. So this is like a really important exercise to do, even if like these characters don't end up looking anything like what I've just drawn. The key here is that I'm really trying to understand how these characters exist in relation to each other, because a lot of times when I just like singularly draw one character over and over and over again, I get really into the details about how this one character is designed. When you place them in a cast, it's suddenly like, well, either they look kind of out of place, or you realize these details don't matter, or you need to redesign them because they no longer fit the role that they're supposed to play. So I think it's just much easier to start with an eagle eye and narrow down. You know, like this is not like a gacha game where each character needs to be super beautiful and hot and decorated. All that needs to happen is that they need to look like they make sense in that role. It's like casting actors. The main thing I needed from this cast was that the circus side had to have a lot more variety than the mafia side. And Annabelle especially needed to stand out from the cast. She needed to be, well, I don't know what she's going to look like yet, but I do know that she cannot look like anyone else and that you need to be able to recognize her instantly, just based on aura, right? And in this lineup, Leto actually disappears a bit because he is generic. He does disappear in situations with lots of people. So that is fine, actually. Like, I don't need my main characters to be super unique or anything. So here's where we ended up with the lineup. I added some extra characters, like I think there should be some policemen in this story, and maybe it's like a buddy cop situation where this guy is an old mentor and this guy's a noob, but he's actually really good at what he does, but this guy never listens. Just thinking about bits like that could happen, because no mafia story is complete without cops. Back to the point about like hyper focusing on one character, like that is really normal for an artist or a writer to do, because you just get obsessed with drawing one character. But often I find that when I'm watching shows or I'm reading manga or whatever, like the side cast is often way more interesting visually and personality wise than the main characters. So I feel like there's just a lot of lost creative sauce if you only focus on the main characters, which is what I used to do. And so I would focus all of my energy on making the main character the coolest person possible and like trying to put all of the traits into the main characters instead of thinking like, oh, I can give this trait to a side character and make that their entire character. And that would be a very interesting and compelling character instead of trying to stuff everything into one character. So let's start redesigning with our main character, Leto. This is what he's always looked like in the past. He's always been sort of like a blonde kid, sort of preppy, sometimes with glasses, always wearing some sort of like dress shirt or formal-ish clothes. I would say that the first version of him, which is like this one in the bottom here, too chill. He was often seen wearing a bathrobe because that's just how chill he was. He was just like in a bathrobe all the time. I'm gonna write too chill here. And then a year after I wrote the original story, I rewrote that story, and he became somebody who was too confident. Okay, I feel like I'm Goldilocks right now, but this version of him is too confident. I mean, what happened is that the first version of the story was like a slice of life. Like, oh, tee, so fun living in the mafia. Like, what? And then the second version of him, it was like more of a mystery sort of story, and he was a Sherlock Holmes. So he was a very cocky, pretentious character in that one, solving crimes and stuff. So you may be wondering, why was the mystery version of this story still not good? Because mystery requires some sort of plotting. Well, it's because all of the mystery elements were attributed to things that happened in past lives, which I never wrote about or decided what they were. So Soul was actually a serial killer in that one, and why was he killing people? I don't know, something happened in the past lives that was telling him to. Why did Leto go to the circus? Because he was feeling the vibes from his past lives there. Why was Leto having hallucinations and going crazy? Well, he was seeing people from the past lives, of course. But like, these things don't mean anything. They were just added for the mysterious vibes. Like, these things are all very annoying to sift through now, when I'm just like, I would just like a story that knows what it actually is. So I think that when redesigning, we can keep the overall physical aspects that he has always been drawn with, like blonde hair, preppy clothes. But the way he acts needs to be very different, because I think that there's no way that the Leto version 3.0 could make any expressions like this or this. It's just not possible for him. So what kind of expressions are possible? Let's explore. So I decided instead of like overthinking it to hell, I would just take the existing expressions that I drew from the past and like change them to be more fitting to the new version of Leto. However, that is really hard when the only information we have about the new version of Leto is that he hates his dad. Like, come on, give me something else. But there is nothing else. I'm like, how do I just design a dad hater? I don't even know what his dad looks like. So since one of the main things I thought that was not correct about the previous versions was that he was too confident, I decided to make him clearly not very confident in this one, at least as like a resting state. So I want this character to be like hunched over, hunched in on himself, kind of hiding behind his hair a little bit, kind of feeling trapped in his clothes. I was kind of thinking about like clothes that wear the character or characters that wear the clothes, and I think this character is getting worn by his clothes. I decided to give him a little thing on his tie. Let's just pretend that people in this mafia get like a little something to put on their body to broadcast to everyone else that like this person is not to be messed with, or like to indicate their status. Leto is not a made man in the mafia, which means like officially part of the family. I think he's just too young, and he also just wouldn't want to do that. But since he's the boss's son, I think he still has a special position of like, he shouldn't touch this guy. I think he really like hates wearing that. I was thinking about like, this guy probably feels like a prisoner all the time. It's kind of the impression I get from him, and he's probably like planning his jailbreak. How that will occur is for the rest of the story to decide. So while I was drawing these and doing the line art, I was using a different ink brush for each one because I just forgot which one I liked. It's been a while since I've drawn. And also, I'm not trying to be super consistent across like different expressions and different poses, just because I don't know what this guy looks like yet. So if I hit something that I like, but it's different from the other ones, I'm like, okay, let's go more in that direction and less on the other ones. So not concerned with consistency, just trying to get the essence of something down to see if it's like correct or not. Okay, so am I satisfied? How am I feeling about what I've done? I don't know. I think I would need to draw him like about 30 more times to really get the feeling for how this character is supposed to act and behave and feel. But currently, there are some expressions and poses that I think are working and some that definitely are not. So I do like this one, the standing one. I think that this is kind of how he stands. He has always been more of an intellectual character, so he has to lead with his head. He is not happy with the situation, clenched fists for real. I like this one. I like this profile view. The front views, like these two, are giving me a lot of trouble. His hair is irritating me. When I was drawing this, I really thought he was looking too much like that Ace Attorney guy, Miles Edgeworth. And although that is sort of the type of character I'm going for, it's also not. I like this one because he is looking a little bit maniacal, and I think that is kind of part of his character. This one where he's getting manhandled, I was trying to make this one about like somebody has decided to like beat him up, but they didn't realize that he was the boss's kid. So now that they're realizing that they're about to get killed or something, and Leto is like kind of regretful because he also knows that this person's gonna get killed for messing with him. Okay, but my main issue with this character currently is that he gives me the impression of like a third-rate villain in a web novel that gets like killed off and everybody cheers and is generally made to be very hateable. Unfortunately, my child, this is what you look like right now. I think that the yellow and the purple is not doing him any favors. I don't know, maybe if the glasses were off, like the vibes would be different. Okay, let me just take his glasses off real quick and see how I feel. Okay, I do think that if I take his glasses off, he'll feel a lot more youthful, which is kind of important because this is sort of like a coming of age story. In the sketches, he also had like under eye bags just because he's kind of like tired all the time. Tired of everyone's bullshit. I was also thinking that, you know, I'm actually not a huge fan of crime stories. I'm just not. I don't care about the law. I don't care about crimes and stuff like that. So I was like, why did I decide to write about this, and how can I make it more interesting for myself? And I was like, okay, so what kind of stories do you like? And I was like, yeah, so I like stories about like secret identity. And I was like, okay, so what if Leto has a secret identity where he wasn't a loser? What if he wants to appear like a little pathetic freak? What if this was just his Clark Kent? Although I feel like Leto would be more like Batman. So secret identities are on the table. Like, what if he's trying to take the mafia down from the inside? That's always a possibility. Unfortunately, this is what happens to people whose favorite characters were Lelouch. So I cannot escape my past. Okay, so the vibes are a little bit better with his glasses off. I think that seriously need to do something about what he looks like from the front. I think we just need to not look at him straight on. Next, we will design our second main character, Soul. This is what he's looked like in the past. I literally made him because I just wanted to draw cool action poses like this, and fire was cool. That was why the entire story happened. However, the main issue I have with him is that he looks like isekai protagonist number 500. Actually, that's generous. Like number 10,003. His outfits are really not doing it for me. He's supposed to be a member of the Circus. I don't know why he's dressed like a Uniqlo e-boy. And also a bunch of his old performing clothes, like this one and this version. I'm pretty sure I just was really into K-pop, and I probably stole this exact outfit from a K-pop performance or something. So for Soul, my goal is to create a character who perhaps has sort of like a hero complex, because that's what his mom gave him. Loves performing, is athletic, has an interesting design, something a little quirky or special about him. This is somebody who talks a lot with his body and is super confident. Something that I wanted to change is that in previous versions, he was more of a scrappy type of character. So I was thinking about different fantasy archetypes that I could base his outfit on. And certain ones would be like pirate or knight, prince, adventurer, rogue, monk, cowboy. I think previously I probably would have picked something more like pirate for him. He was more of an outlaw-ish kind of character. But this time I want him to be more of a very typical hero, chosen one adventurer. So I was trying to think about the plot of the story that they would have in the circus while I was making this. He's wearing a costume, right? So he has to be playing a part in a play or a performance that they're putting on. So what part would he play, and how would they dress a character like that up? So I feel like he would be given the main character role and possibly be either cursed or blessed by fire. So I try to make his outfit sort of like adventure who got chosen to be something more. I was also thinking about what kind of animal he moves like, because in the past I would have said this character is more like a monkey or a fox, this sort of witty, sneaky, agile type of animal. But I think that this doesn't really fit the current archetype I'm going for, so I feel like this version of him is probably just some sort of dog. And I was like, that sort of fits because he is good at listening to his owner, which is his mom. So I would picture a dog with a stick that is on fire in his mouth. Okay, so my thoughts. It is at least an improvement from where it was before. I think he looks more distinct from Uniqlo e-boy. The main thing I was focused on was creating a outfit that would be interesting to see in motion, so I tried to give it a lot of different flappy parts and lots of layers and lots of places that are tight and then loose and have lots of contrast like that. I think this is a good start, but my main concern right now is that he looks very similar to certain existing characters. While I was drawing this, I was thinking that he really reminded me of like Sun Wukong, the Monkey King from Chinese legend. That character is always depicted as like charismatic, like active character with a lance or a staff, and he is usually like, you know, in yellow and red with all sorts of cloth flowing off of him. And then at one point I thought that he also looked like Goku, and Goku was obviously inspired by the Monkey King, so that makes sense. And then I thought he also looked like Naja from also Chinese legend, because Naja also has a lance and he has fire powers, and his hair in the most recent adaptation is like slicked back. And he has this extroverted, vibrant personality. And I was like, I think in the future reworks of this story, I would like to explore different ways this character can appear. And it will probably help more once I start exploring the rest of the circus cast and like establishing what exactly the look of the circus is. One thing that I was thinking is that this doesn't have to be a problem if the actual story that they're telling in the circus is Journey to the West. That would be pretty interesting to mix with like 1920s America. But I would also like to explore other ideas, because originally, when I was looking for visual inspiration for Circus, I was very inspired by the Venetian carnival. You know, Mafia is originated from Italy. This carnival is also in Italy, so that would kind of make sense. And this idea of like this carnival was created so that anyone of any social status and race and age and gender could disguise themselves fully in costume, masked up, like no skin showing at all, so their identity was totally covered, and they would just have like crazy festivals with each other. And that idea of like, you know, I like identity shenanigans, and I think not utilizing this sort of like idea and concept of like the carnival where anyone can be anyone is a lost potential. So perhaps in the future when I redesign Soul, he will have a mask, if he is the type of character who never ever shows his face. Pretend you never saw this. One thing that is also interesting is that I have never gone to a circus before. I've never experienced a circus. It's always just been like a conceptual interest. Obviously I've watched documentaries, I've watched like the Cirque du Soleil recordings on YouTube. I'm not super into traditional circus aesthetics or extremely like into circus movies or fiction. So the goal obviously is to take this sort of concept and idea and make it more interesting to me personally. And I think that is what we'll do in the next video. In the next video, we will probably zoom out more, because I feel like with the character redesigns, we zoomed in too much and got too into the details when we don't really know anything else about like the story or the world. So we'll start with 2 pages. Yay, I get another page to tell the story. And then I'll probably like brainstorm about expanding the Mafia and the circus world some more. So I hope this is interesting to you, and I hope you revive some of your dead characters that you made when you were a child. And if you are a child, just know that the characters you're making right now are going to stay with you for the rest of your life, so choose wisely, I guess. And with that, thank you to my patrons. They saw this video before anyone else when it was still in its draft form, so if you're interested in that, you can check it out in the description. But otherwise, I will see you whenever I see you.